So thank you very much for coming here to this great conference on digital innovation. I'd just like to start this panel on growth and innovation in corporations by asking all the panelists to introduce themselves briefly and describe what they do for the companies they work for. So if you start at the very right end of the panel, if we may, please.
So hope you can hear me. So Olivier Garral, Unilever Ventures. You have seen some few people from Unilever today. Unilever Ventures is the private equity and venture capital arm of Unilever. And we have been there for 12 years, and we are investing in tech company, not only in digital, but also in biotech, personal care, and different kind of areas. And we are set up and we have investment teams based in London, Mumbai, and San Francisco.
Gary.
Okay, so my name is Gary Stewart. I'm the director of WIRA in the UK. WIRA is Telefónica's accelerator program, so we have 14 academies in 12 countries all around the world, basically between Europe and Latin America. We actually invest capital directly into the startups, so we normally invest around 40,000 in exchange for about 5 to 10% of the company. To date, we've invested in 500 companies worldwide, and the startups, in addition to getting the cash, also get all of the traditional acceleration services that most accelerators give, plus the intention or the hope that we can also get them inside of Telefónica so that they can scale up.
Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol. I do marketing for LinkedIn, which is a professional social network I'm sure you've heard of.
Joe.
Hi, my name is Jo Bertram. I'm from Uber. I'm the regional general manager for UK, Ireland, and the Nordics, which covers our markets in London, Manchester, Dublin, Stockholm, Gothenburg, and in the last week we launched Leeds, Oslo, Copenhagen, and Helsinki. So my remit has recently increased.
Diane?
Fantastic. Hi, I'm Diane Perlman, and I'm the startups lead for Microsoft Ventures here in the UK. I'm part of a global program that Microsoft has to work with startups around the world. We run accelerators. We also have our BizSpark program, which gives free tools and technology and cloud to startups. And we have a global community of companies that are startups that are running through our various programs. And we are now in 10 markets with our accelerators, including London, Berlin, Paris, Beijing, Bangalore, Tel Aviv, and Seattle.
So I'm going to start, if I may, asking the two young sort of high-growth representatives of two young high-growth companies to describe what were the innovations that have formed the basis of your companies, and how did you bring them to market? If I start, in sequential order of year formed with Joe, if I may.
Sure. So, I think the innovations that Uber brought us is a couple. One is obviously technology allows us to think about taxi and private hire industry in a very different way. So the ability to use a smartphone, the geolocation, the sort of seamless payments by paying in the app and things like that means that we were able to bring a single app to lots of different cities and work in a very similar way. I think from the driver side, we also brought a very different way of thinking about the industry. Typically, drivers used to work as salaried employees working very inflexible shifts, and the operator would tell them when they need to work. They'd have very little transparency. What Uber brought, and there's analogies in many other industries, but is the ability for those drivers to work as individual entrepreneurs, essentially. They work with us as much or as little as they want, whenever they want, on a non-exclusive basis. Which means, and then the ability of the technology means that they can actually make more money. We're able to give lower prices to customers, but use the efficiency of the technology by how we think about the demand and supply curve to mean that the drivers earn more money because at the end of a 4-hour shift or an 8-hour shift, they've done more jobs.
So essentially, you're using digital technology to implement a new business model for transportation, right, which brings benefits to customers and the suppliers of the services, right? And you're in the middle, right?
Yeah.
So how many people in this audience have actually had a ride with Uber? Okay. So you're pretty reasonably long, the adoption cycle. How many people are on LinkedIn? Okay, yeah, but that's almost like an established company these days, right? So, Carol, how did you guys get there?
Get there?
Yes, where you are today. And what was it that spurred the growth of your company?
So by definition, technology companies are obsessed with innovation. And this obsession will keep us awake at night, and it will also keep us alive, because as you all noticed, the technology industry will have a lot of players fall into oblivion in 20 years. So technically, if you look at the past 20 years, 25% of technology companies have disappeared. So how do you keep yourself in a 5% club of those companies who stay beyond 20 years? And that, we believe, is through innovation and relentless focus on the consumer. And the other thing that was really true to LinkedIn's success was that we stayed true to the original mission. So this company, when it was created, it was 2003, and I'm sure you know the story. It's one of those Silicon Valley stories where it started really small in one of the founders' house. It started with a mission of enabling professionals around the world to be more successful. That mission stayed the same throughout the years. We started the first month, LinkedIn had 4,500 members. Today it's 332 million with members, with 2 members every second, 2 new members on LinkedIn every second. And throughout these 11 years, the mission stayed the same. We only redefined what success means. And success today is to create economic opportunity for every professional. And it's also to make sure we transform ourselves towards whatever career objective we want to have. So that's the transformation that we offer our members. And we're really excited to see how companies leverage LinkedIn to transform themselves from a business point of view. In the past, when you wanted to hire someone, you wanted to look for talent, you would just post a job somewhere, right? And we called it post and pray, right? You would just post the job and pray that you will have the right candidates showing up. Today, talent professionals are actually using the sophisticated tools that we are providing to make sure they create an employer brand and they create some kind of engagement with the best talent worldwide. The same thing applied for marketing and the same thing applied for sales. We innovated in the space of marketing to make sure it's not only about advertising to the right people, it's using data to advise to the right people, to advertise to the right people at the right moment. And sales is the latest innovation, which is really fascinating, where businesses have understood now how to use social to transform the way they sell to what we call social selling. So these are the big innovations that have happened in the past few years.
So it's focusing on using technology to create benefit for end users and communities.
Absolutely.
Right. So Diane, from the point of view of Microsoft Ventures, what sort of characteristics do you look for when you decide to take on companies and sort of foster them for rolling out products and services in the general community?
So for Microsoft, I mean, we're running 2 cohorts a year now with our accelerator here in London. And we are typically looking for 4 things. The first one being team. So we're looking for great teams. Even if the idea is excellent, we have to believe in the team. So that's really important for us when we're selecting our cohorts for the accelerator. Second is the idea itself. The third piece is that we're looking for teams that are coachable. And lastly, looking for teams that are, and ideas that are fundable, things we think actually investors would put money behind. And that's kind of the basic principle that we're looking for.
What is your investment horizon, both in terms of seeing things materialize and happen, bring product to market, and in terms of getting your money back? Is that measured in years, months?
So it's a bit
decades?
different for Microsoft Ventures because we actually, despite our name, we actually don't invest.
Okay.
Our program, we don't invest cold hard cash, I should say. But our investment comes in the form of the accelerator program, which is an extensive program in the UK. It's a 14-week mini entrepreneur MBA that comes with coursework, that comes with mentoring, access to VCs, access to customers, etc. So it's a full program, and of course our BizSpark program where we're giving product and cloud. So that's how we invest, and of course obviously the time of our team and people throughout our ecosystem.
Your horizon is measured in a few years, presumably, right? So well, when you want to see the idea come to fruition, right? If I may put it that way, if you're not.
Sure. So companies coming into our accelerator typically will be beyond just the idea stage. They're going to be at seed stage already. Yeah. And with our accelerator programs, for example, we've graduated about 230 companies through the accelerators globally over the past couple of years. In the UK, we've only been going for just over a year. So we've got about, with this class that's about to graduate, we'll have about 30 odd companies who've come through the programs in the UK. But with our programs globally, we've had about 80% of the companies are getting venture funded within 1 year of pitch day, and that's to the tune of about $1.5 million, and we've had 14 exits, one of which was a Microsoft acquisition. So I guess we're in a slightly unusual position, is that with our accelerator, we don't take equity, we don't invest, but we're looking to create successful startups. So that's how we operate.
Thank you. Gary, when it comes to, you're a subsidiary, wholly owned subsidiary of Telefonica, which is the parent company of O2 amongst others, right? What are the criteria you look for when you take on client companies into your accelerator?
Well, I think that in order to select the companies, I mean, first of all, the idea behind what we're doing is we're really trying to learn from the market. So the idea is kind of, as Carol said, we understand that Telefonica has a past as kind of like basically utility or monopoly, and we have to think about kind of what the future is going to entail. And the future is not going to be about the kinds of products and services that we offered in the past. So it means that we need to be looking out for the next WhatsApp that might remove all of your SMS business, or the next Skype that may remove all of your roaming business. So we kind of are looking very generally to see kind of what's happening in the market, and that's part of the reason why we do this in all of the different countries where we have an operating business, because it's really also about kind of business intelligence and learning what's happening in the market. In terms of the criteria that we use, they're pretty much the same as, I guess, any other accelerator. And the only thing that we do a little differently, I guess, is that we also make sure that when we're choosing the startups, we ask some of the top VCs in Europe to be the ones that actually kind of give the final sign-off in terms of getting their feedback as to what are the ideas and products out there that they're really, really interested in. So the way we do our process is at the very beginning, we will open it up, a general call worldwide. We'll get in a lot of applications. We'll do an internal review. We'll also see from Telefonica if there's anything specifically that they're looking for. And then we'll basically convene a jury of about 7 investors and ask those investors to kind of review, to kind of interview the companies and then tell us if at least 50% of them say yes, then the company gets into the accelerator. So I think it's partly about as well kind of learning from the market instead of trying to dictate what it is that we think the trends of the future might look like.
So if you could sum up the goal of having the accelerator in one sentence, it would be learning from the market what's going on with some P&L.
I think Telefonica has been very clear. It's basically that there needs to be a transformation from an analog telco into a digital telco, and the only way to do that is through open innovation.
Oliver, Unilever,
Yeah.
and the purpose of your investments and
So,
describe it in the same way,
yeah.
please.
So first of all, you have a framework. We do invest in companies that have a potential to take benefits of Unilever scale, people, and capabilities, or have a potential to become suppliers to Unilever. That's the best way to create a kind of platform for exchange between a startup, scale-up, and a corporate, from our perspective. In terms of the criteria we're using, it's not that different from any VCs, really. We rate pretty highly the management team. We love to see very differentiated offers coming through. And we are also looking for companies who have really a potential to become global, because one of the benefits of working with a corporate is we invest in a tech company sitting in the US, in London, in France, or Germany, and we are in a position to develop business opportunities for them in Asia, being in India, Malaysia, Philippines, could be sitting in LATAM. So that's where basically they will find a home and a marketplace where they're in a position to work and meet a number of general managers and to develop their business in quite a number of countries over a pretty short period of time. As an illustration of that, you don't need necessarily to get all equity to do that. If I had to describe a journey on interactions with Unilever, the way we have set up ourselves is, first of all, we have created the foundry, which is in a way the entry point to the corporate, the open window between the tech ecosystems and Unilever. Then what we do is quite often to run pilots to test the solutions which is being proposed, making sure that it has really a potential to become a leaded and recommended solution going forward. When we find a winning formula, then we tend to invest in equity in those companies. Yeah, so there's a journey we're going through with the companies, and I think that can provide some great opportunities for a number of entrepreneurs. Those are the way we work.
Since thank you. Since this is a digital conference, I was reminded, coming down to the conference venue, of a number of models of innovation in corporations that have been successful in the past. I don't think anyone was as successful as AT&T and Bell Labs. Nobody has surpassed them, I think. I was thinking about the number of innovations that came out in the post-World War II era, starting with the transistor in 1948, followed by information theory, followed by the laser, followed by C, followed by Unix, followed by C++, followed by optical networks, followed by wireless networks, followed by key cellular technologies, followed by charge-coupled devices, which underpin the digital camera technology of today, followed by fluorescence microscopy, to name something. Is there any corporation out there today that is in the position to be sort of a beneficial sort of benefactor of innovation in the way that AT&T was in the olden days? Or are we all just sort of, is there nobody out there? Is there any hub of innovation comparable which is in symbiosis with a corporate entity? Would you think?
Well, I mean, I think there's been a paradigm shift, right? Because, I mean, I think you're talking about a world where maybe innovation was done internally within corporations, and the entire idea now is that the accelerator movement and the corporate accelerator movement is kind of a move towards open innovation. So I think that the idea is that everyone is trying to benefit from innovation, but the idea is it should be done in a kind of more open way, as opposed to thinking that it should be done in a kind of purely corporate way. And I think that, for example, when I speak to the people at Telefonica in terms of internal research and development, they may have their own projects, but they also realize that the way to find the next products of the future are probably more by working with the startups, which is why I think now there's been kind of more of this movement towards corporate accelerators. And I don't think it's something that only Telefonica is doing. I think pretty much all corporates right now are thinking about how to access this innovation through an open platform by working with startups in one way or another.
Oliver.
Well, I agree with that. I think that we have started open innovations programs something like 15 years ago. I think the point is we still invest massively on research and development. Unilever is spending around 1 billion euros every year around R&D. But we have also to create and build links outside. Being just tech company, being also your suppliers' ecosystems. We have great suppliers and we love to work with them to find and develop some more innovative products and solutions to consumers. So it's more a matter of building ecosystems. I think that's, to your point, Gary, I think that's more and more you have to accept the fact that quite certainly you will need to share some of those innovations. It's very difficult to come with proprietary for your own only innovations. In the pharma industry is a good example of that, where they are developing a lot of partnerships, sometimes working in between competitors on some very onerous, expensive programs, but very innovative programs. So that's the way we work, really. Working and teaming up with a number of partners. Tech companies are some, labs are others, universities, suppliers. That's the only way to see the light.
So, Diane.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what's been said, really. I mean, obviously, Microsoft is a big spender in R&D as well, and there's lots of things that are being cooked up, you know, back in the various research centers that we have around the world, which will someday become, you know, the next innovations. But of course, you know, we're always working with startups and looking to work with startups and to identify innovation or find things that can plug into other things that we're doing. But also increasingly, more and more corporates are coming to us and saying, you know, you guys have figured it out. You're working with startups through your accelerator and your programs. How can we, you know, tap into that, or how can we partner? So it seems to be there's a big movement. And in fact, you know, even if you look at, for example, BT, you know, they knew that they needed to change, and they created Hive Home around the whole home monitoring. And actually, the company that monitors that system from a developer ops perspective is one of our startups from our last cohort, Dataloop. So it just shows that, you know, even big corporates have to look at how they're doing things and tap into startups to, you know, bring that innovation or to help them innovate or be better at what they're doing. So I think it's a big trend.
I was just going to add one additional point. I don't think it's only the corporates that are doing it. I think even startups are doing it. So I mean, we have two examples right here of startups that will probably have to think about innovation in the future. Facebook buying Instagram and buying all of these other companies instead of trying to do it itself. I think that every company realizes that a lot of times creating one successful innovation is kind of interesting if you can get that done, but a lot of times you can't do it by yourself. And even Apple, which I think has been really, really good at innovation, still buys other startups because they realize at the end of the day, you can't do it by yourself.
So, Carol, for instance, LinkedIn, you're a relatively mature startup now, right? Is your innovation still focused inside, or have you started acquiring companies?
So I think LinkedIn is doing both, internal innovation and acquisitions. One of the latest acquisitions is a company called Bizo, who will help us empower our marketing solutions and make them even more precise than they are today. But as I was listening to the panelists and I was thinking about the shared agenda that we all have attending this conference, it's a question of where to innovate and how to innovate. But there's also a question of what's the right innovation. And as a marketeer, I have to say that I've been observing that sometimes, and I don't pretend that I hold the truth on this, but I've been observing that sometimes there are two sets of questions that we need to ask. The first question is, we used to ask ourselves, what's the product benefit? What's the consumer market? What's the consumer benefit, right? As traditional marketeers, it was one of the traditional marketing questions. I think we have to somehow move from what's the product benefit to where's the magic? Uber, as an example, is bringing magic because you don't have to pull your credit card. Like personally, when I come to London, I only use Uber. I don't have to find sterlings and I don't have to go through the headache of an ATM. So it's actually bringing magic. So the first question is, to me, where's the magic? And considering the lack of a consumer attention, that people have a lot of messaging and a lot of things that call their attention and very limited brain space, it's really, to me, one of the key selection criteria is to look at where's the magic. And the second question is actually thinking about moving from consumption to creating a movement. And in a lot of situations, you will look at very innovative companies, and it's not about consumption, it's about being part of a movement. And two case studies I recommend to look at for us to get inspiration on this are actually Tesla, obviously, which is more than a product, it's a movement. And the second case study, I'm sure you will love that one, is the Beyoncé Harvard Business School case study, which actually is a story of creating a movement beyond consumption. Do you like how I talk about Beyoncé in a panel about innovation?
Very much so. Joe, you have enough magic from the origin, from the Big Bang of Uber, or do you need to, is the innovation of the original innovation still driving you, or do you need to look outside as well?
No, we're constantly innovating, but we do that internally. And I think I was just reflecting on how we think about it, hearing the others speak. I think our job, or all of our job and all of my team's job, is constantly innovating. We're always innovating on the product side, the technical product side. We have a team of engineers in San Francisco and around the world developing that, and we're always releasing new updates, both for the consumer side and for the driver side. But we're also always innovating on how we provide that service to customers, how we provide the service to the drivers, how we can be more efficient as a local team, how we can structure our local team even. And I think there's a couple of things that enable that. Firstly, it's a really decentralized structure. So we have a local team in every single market that we operate in with a huge amount of autonomy. So I have complete freedom here in the UK to structure how does it work for London? And we're always innovating. Does this team structure work? Or should we actually put more resources here? Literally moving it every couple of months. And I think the other element is the culture of innovation and the risk tolerance. If you're going to innovate, you're going to make mistakes. And having a culture where people have the autonomy to make the decision, try something, and maybe it fails, and then be rewarded for trying it and failing. As long as you don't fail twice at the same thing, you have to take those risks to figure out what works.
Yeah, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? So we only have about 6 minutes left of this panel, so I'd like to open up the discussion to the audience. Lady in the second row from the front. Do we have microphones, please? Perhaps if you could stand up and speak loudly, or wait for a microphone openings.
Hi. To sort of truly drive innovation through big corporates, you've got to make sure there's buy-in from all the business units across all the organisation. When we step outside of our startup world and all the initiatives we're doing, what's your advice for actually getting an entire organisation to really have innovation at their core focus? Because I think when we move outside of our world, our startup and digital world, there's probably 80% of traditional businesses that still don't engage with startups and innovation.
If I start, the gentleman from Unilever, Oliver, please
Yeah,
more established
it's a tricky question for venture funds who are trying to step outside of the corporate to move back in to understand how we should. So, but I think that if there are some things we can build from the tech or startups type of models and how we can apply that to the corporate, I think that's the most striking element is certainly to rely less on your scale and your systems and rely more on individuals and talents. It's putting the human at the center of anything you do as the main vector of innovation, and trying to set up around that some organizations which are fully dedicated and focused. So certainly to try to find ways to protect the ideas or innovations development, and get people very driven by the outcome also in terms of incentive. Because it's maybe less the case today, but when you go to the West Coast, it looks like a kind of gold rush, yeah? The guys are dressed like teenagers, but believe me, they're just thinking about money, a lot of them at least, which is quite interesting to see. But incentive is important for the people. Very, very important.
Gary, incentive, is that the key driver? Or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that what I would think is you need to have a top-down approach, a bottom-up approach, and then also make sure the startups do their job. So what I mean is that in Wayra, the person who founded the company is now the COO of the company. So that means that you have protection at the very top level. That's kind of very, very useful to make sure that even though there are a lot of kinds of ups and downs in the company, changes in strategy, as long as the person who has the overall vision of the company still views you as relevant to that vision, that's kind of like a huge benefit. The second thing is, even if with that being said, you still then need to make sure that as an accelerator, you're engaging all of the relevant people within the organization from the kind of bottom up. So the middle managers and kind of the other people in the organization as well. Because even if the CEO says, this is what we want to do, if they don't buy into it or if their incentives aren't based in any way on that, then they're not going to do it. So you need to kind of figure out some way to make them understand that this is a win-win situation. And then lastly, one of the other things is, since I come from the entrepreneurial world myself, a lot of entrepreneurs usually look at corporates and say, you're the enemy, my job is to disrupt and kill you. I think that one of the things that we've had to learn how to do is teach the startups how to speak with corporates using slightly more friendly language. Because a lot of times at the very beginning, they would go in there with the same pitch that they would have for investors, and that's really not going to work. So it's also kind of teaching the startups that you need to kind of analyze the business beforehand and understand how you're going to help them to create value so that they don't view you as a threat or as an irrelevancy, but actually someone who's going to help them achieve their objectives.
So, Diane, so it's incentivize people, communicate benefits, get buy-in from existing constituencies. Anything else you would add?
Yeah, I mean, it is a tricky one, to get people engaged. I think corporates talk a good game, but how do you really get true innovation going through? And I think, I'm trying to remember, I think is it Dell who's got a program now where they've said that everyone has to take 10% of their time and spend it on entrepreneurial pursuits, and that's part of their scorecard, it's part of their requirements for their employees. And so, I think this is an interesting way to look at trying to create entrepreneurism as a movement within a company, because I think it's true, unless you put some kind of incentive around it, I think there's a tendency for people to say, well, that's not the metric that I'm delivering. And even though they might be interested, it's difficult to get their attention. So I think those kinds of things are really important. But like anything, I was at the Global Innovation Forum last week, and they were asking a similar question, and it was like, how do you go and sell in an idea, a new idea or an entrepreneurial idea into a corporate? And it was even if you're inside, and it was about finding those champions at the right levels, people that will actually take you into the C-suite or wherever it is, and get those ideas adopted. Those things all will help. It's not a perfect system.
So you're finding also influencers, right? Mm-hmm. So LinkedIn is a public company by now. And so this is almost like a valid question for you guys, since you are a publicly traded company, you're established. So how would you drive change through an organization as if you were still a startup?
Exactly. So I think LinkedIn is acting as a startup. And I think a lot of companies that are operating in the space of technology still keep that mindset of a startup. And I was thinking about what the panelists just said, and it reminded me a quote from our founder and Silicon Valley legend, Reid Hoffman. He said, if you are proud of your beta, it means that you launched too late.
Okay. Joe, concluding remarks, we're running out of time. When you started in the Uber office in the UK, it was 3 people. Now it's how many?
We're 35 here in London, probably about 55 in the region.
Okay, so how do you intend to drive changes through that organization?
I mean, I think one of the things, I mean, everything that's already been said, but also making sure there's very clear values that the whole organization holds about innovation and how we perform together. So we're doing a lot in the office locally around what those kind of innovative values are. One of the competencies that all of us, myself and every team member at every level, gets assessed on in their performance reviews is innovation. So making sure that you're bringing that up with each and every team member. And then we're always hiring people with that entrepreneurial spirit. We go slowly on everything except hiring. We go fast on everything except hiring, which will go slow, and make sure that we get the right person with that right mindset.
So hire people with entrepreneurial spirit to keep the entrepreneurial fluids running. I'm sorry, we're out of time. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great panel. Thank you.